What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Keifer Madness podcast. We've had a little bit of a break here, but as you can imagine, getting ready for this race was commanding a lot of my time. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing was adding a bunch of stuff onto my plate that was going to be distracting from getting ready for this race. It was a huge goal of mine, something that took a long time to work towards. And just getting my schedule to sync with training and everything like that in coordination with having guests on was just getting a little bit too much to juggle. So I made the decision to put a quick pause on the podcast and focus on training and getting ready for Cocodona. I appreciate everybody that reached out in the meantime asking why the flow of episodes had stopped coming out. It did mean a lot to me that you guys had enjoyed the podcast and were looking forward to more episodes. So a little bit of what this episode is going to be. So I'm going to essentially walk through a little bit of the training that I did for Cocodona, how I prepared for it. That was something a lot of people were curious to. So I want to dive into a tiny bit of that, just what the training block kind of entailed, what I did to get ready, and then essentially how long it took for me to get ready for the race. And then kind of do a little bit of a race breakdown, give you guys a little bit of a play-by-play without getting too much into the weeds. It was a 250-mile race that took me about 5 days to complete, so I don't want to sit here and just talk your guys' ear off with the details of each and every little thing that happened. And then I had posted on my Instagram a little bit of a Q&A section on just things that you guys wanted to hear about or questions that you guys wanted to ask. I will answer a few of those throughout the course of just a little bit of the race breakdown. And I tried to make it so that I screened some of those out that were just going to get answered contextually during the race breakdown so that I'm not getting redundant with content. And then we'll roll into the QA section and I'll give a little bit of a breakdown on some post-race thoughts and kind of give you guys a little bit of a what's next for me. That's a question that I've gotten a lot recently too. So one thing that I wanted to kind of touch on that I've gotten before the race more than afterwards, but why Cocodona? Cocodona, specifically for me, I got introduced to the 200-mile distance really early in my ultra career. So I'd finished my first 50-miler and wound up wandering into a race where I'd met a gentleman by the name of Aaron Fleischer. Aaron has since completed every single year that Cocodona has been ran. He's gotten a finish. And he had asked me to come out and crew and pace him in 2022. So I got introduced to the race a long time ago. This race covers a lot of areas of Arizona that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I think the traverse of going from Phoenix to Flagstaff has just always kind of painted an interesting picture for me in terms of my personal journey as an adult. And kind of taking this journey going back to kind of where I grew up. So I grew up in northern Arizona. I grew up in Winslow, which is about 40 miles east of Flagstaff. So it's always kind of felt like a little bit of this journey going from Phoenix, where a lot of my adult life has happened, back to northern Arizona. And a little bit of that journey for me internally is kind of getting back to some of my roots and kind of outlining the journey that I've gone through with sobriety, where a lot of the chaos and things that I've battled and gone through have happened here in the Valley, here in Phoenix. You know, me being an adult living here, working in the bar industry and my sobriety journey and everything. So it's always held a little bit of a different meaning for me, just kind of working from Phoenix back to northern Arizona and this kind of full circle homecoming of sorts, where it's kind of been this closing of a chapter where I've kind of accepted everything that happened in Phoenix and worked my way back to a version of myself that I think flourished when I was younger and living in northern Arizona and growing up and going through all of that stuff. So it's held a little bit of a special meaning to me, and I've kind of kept that close to my chest. I haven't really shared that with many people, but that journey on foot represents a lot of the journey that I've gone through internally. So this race did mean a lot for me going into this. So kind of dive into a little bit of the training block now. This race specifically felt like a giant culmination of everything that I've done in the ultra space. Like, it felt like every single race that I've done, every bit of training that I've done leading up to this point built up to getting ready for Cocodona. I've been in the ultra space, for about 5 or 6 years now, and it's hard to look at the full scope of everything I've done not leading to Cocodona. So, specifically, I would say November of 2024, right after FatOx. I ran FatOx. I had a really good performance there. Ended up winning first overall, first male. And I actually put a little bit of a pause on running for a second. So I had gotten a new job. I started a new job in December, and so I was kind of toying with this like really heavy strength block that I was doing just some supplemental running. I think I was running 2 or 3 times a week and then lifting 6. So the thought process there was I wanted to build a really good strength foundation, and then kind of layer that into getting ready for Cocodona. I knew the sign up would come in May when the race started, so I figured, November to April, I would do a really heavy strength training block, and then that would kind of give me a good foundation to supplement the strength training while getting ready for a long race and the higher volume and doing some training and running volume that I had never done before. I figured the base of strength would give me a good platform to build on top of to then keep myself from getting injured, being able to handle new training stimulus, and kind of go through the whole training block. So that was kind of the reasoning there. Around, I would say, September of 25, I had started working with Mike McKnight again. So Mike was actually the first coach that I had. I started with him in 2022, and we worked together for about 2 or 3 years, I believe. I put a pause on coaching with him, and I had actually taken a small break from running when we had my second child. And so Mike and I resumed in September of last year, and he was essentially walking me through getting ready for Cocodona. Volume wise, I would say since about October of last year, I've been averaging somewhere between like 70 and 80 miles a week, and that was kind of where my training consistently stayed. I think my peak week going into Cocodona was about 90 miles. And really the focus for me was just making sure that I was getting big adventure days, and getting the long runs in, exploring the course and things of that nature. Obviously, speed work and things of that nature are always going to be really, really important. But I really just wanted to make sure that I was going through the process of being out there for a long time, feeling those longer efforts, and getting used to just time on feet for, 10, 12, 13 hours at a time. Some of the cool stuff I got to do was we went and did a big training camp in the Grand Canyon. And then I really wanted to give a big shout out to my buddy Luke that also completed Cocodona. We did a humongous amount of training together, and I also wanted to give a shout out to his wife Katie, because there was multiple weekends that she was driving us up north and letting us run the course, and she was hitting all of the crew stops where the aid stations would be and sacrificing her weekends. And I truthfully don't think that I would have been as prepared for this race without them. It's tough to coordinate those things, and they were very willing to, donate their time, their resources and everything like that. So they were huge in terms of me being able to explore the course, and just super thankful that I had met Luke and started training with them. We've got another buddy, Matt, and his wife Kylie. They had done some training runs with us too, and they've all been extremely instrumental in my growth as a runner over the past year or so, and just getting ready for Cocodona. Matt and Kylie have both finished 200 milers, so they were big points of resource for me, just giving training tips and giving us a little bit of an idea of things that we were going to experience when we were out there. So I had a freaking village behind me getting ready for this thing, man. It was great. And that was really one of the most enjoyable things, was just having people to share this whole process with. Luke was in the process of getting ready to, so being able to bounce stuff off of him anytime that there was doubt or things that I'm just kind of like doing mental hurdles, trying to figure out and go through. I had him as a resource to kind of share thoughts with, and he did the same with me. So it was really cool having someone to bounce everything off of as we're both getting ready for something we've never done before. And so that'll kind of lead me into just a little bit of a race recap. So we end up going up to Black Canyon City the day before the race. Went to packet pickup, which was a cool experience. You kind of get to like start settling into a little bit of the hype of the race. I knew that this was going to be an exciting one. Cocodona has exploded in popularity, and getting to experience the whole start line experience and the day before the expo was really, really cool too. Got to go do packet pickup. You get to do the bib photo with the before and after, or setting up the before for the after. But that was a really, really neat thing. Went and took a picture with everybody at the start line, and then I was actually able to connect with Cam Haynes in person for the first time. He recently had connected with me on Instagram because of a podcast that I had done with my buddy Brian. If you haven't listened to that, please do. I think Brian probably did the best job interviewing, to the point where it was really easy for me to share some of my story and my background. So I did want to give a shout out to Brian too. Wolfie's World podcast. I'll actually link that episode in the show notes here. The other thing, so from there we went to the expo, headed back to the hotel, got the crew car ready, and essentially we ate dinner with my family at my mom and her husband's house, and then headed to the hotel. I pre-taped my feet, kind of got things ready for the morning, and then pretended to sleep for a few hours. I think I finally ended up falling asleep at like 11, maybe 11:30, and my alarm was set for 2:30 to head to the start line. So that was something that was a little bit concerning. Waking up probably sleep deprived in what was going to be a week of running with very little sleep in the first place. So we wake up, my alarm goes off at 2:30. We jump in the car, head to the start line, get to the start line, wait in line to get the tracker that they assign to you. They strap that onto your pack, and then you kind of go hang out in the corral. And that was when things really kind of started to settle in. Anybody that's been at the start line of an ultra before, the energy just kind of starts to permeate off of everybody, and you can kind of feel this heavy understanding of what you're about to do for the next couple of days that I think everybody kind of starts to come to terms with. And it was cool kind of seeing a lot of the elite runners hanging out towards the front. I ended up standing next to my buddy Luke that I trained with, and we were both just pretty quiet for the few minutes leading up to the horn going off and us taking off from that start line. I was pleasantly surprised. My buddy Aaron that I mentioned earlier, he ended up finding me at the start line, so I got to start with him and Luke, which was a pretty special moment. That really did mean a lot to me. The countdown starts, and we go flying out of that start corral, and I've never experienced anything like this, man. The amount of people there, the lights, the amount of cameras that are there following the elites, like, it was just insane. Probably the closest thing that I'll come to experiencing, like, the escarpment going up Western States, where everybody is just like in all of the runners' faces. It feels super tight, and you can't help but just kind of like smile as you're going through there, and just experiencing all of those people that just want to cheer on all of these people that are about to do this insane feat of running 250 miles. So we come out of there. The first sections are kind of this like flowy, kind of hilly section of the Black Canyon Trail that you go through. And I knew this section for me was critical. It's hot, it's exposed. You do about 10,000 feet of climbing in the first 36 miles of this thing. And so coming out of that, I really wanted to make sure that I was paying attention to my hydration, my fueling, and everything. Pretty much my mentality was, if I could get through the first 36 of this course relatively unscathed, I was confident that I could get to the finish line, which is crazy over the course of a 250-mile race. That, like, my critical moment was probably mile 1 through 36 in terms of my confidence in getting through the race. We go flying out of there. Luke and I both kind of settle into a good rhythm of running downhill, just kind of taking it super easy, hiking and getting through the small climbs at the beginning there. It was tough to settle into a calm pace and mentality going through that first section. they had added quite a few people to the race this year. I think there was 425 starters compared to about 250, 275 in the past. And you could feel the congestion and a little bit of a frantic energy from everybody. I think we all knew that we were blessed with a little bit of good weather on the start this year. So I think everybody was wanting to really quickly get through this first section, and you could feel it. So we ended up coming up to the first water station, which I think was at like mile 7.5 or so. And this is where I fucked up for the first time. And it's really early on in the race to have done this, but at some point I didn't refill a bottle with a drink mix. We had gotten to the water station where all the helpers were there, getting everybody situated. So you run kind of light for that first 7 miles, and then you essentially have to leave that first station with at least 4 liters. So I ended up filling up with 5 liters, and I think I had my bag of drink mix, and somewhere in the process of the volunteer helping me, someone else came in, he invited the guy to come around me, and my pack had slid off, and I think it knocked off my drink mix, and I just didn't take it into account. So when I got moving again, I had noticed that my drink mix was light, but I figured it was just hot and I was sweating more than usual, and I just didn't take into account that I might not have refilled that. So still not sure exactly what I did there, but that's going to kind of paint a picture for where things started to go wrong. We worked through that section pretty well. I feel like we got through there really efficiently. We were making good time. We weren't blowing up. Everybody was running pretty easy. And then I would say about mile 25, something just felt off. And I had noticed that I was feeling a little bit bonky, and I wasn't too worried about it. We were running with a good group of people. Our buddy John Bodden, who I've done a couple of races with, we actually finished Coldwater around the same time, my first 100 miler. He's a good community guy, big person with the rotor group out here in Phoenix. So he does a lot of those events, and he's really active in the trail community here, but he's become a good friend over the years. So it was exciting to kind of share some miles with him early on. We get about to mile 28 or 30, somewhere in that range, just outside of the Lane Mountain Aid Station, and I decided to drop my pack and just kind of start taking a mental inventory because I was starting to feel kind of shitty. And drop my pack, take a pee real quick, and I am pissing like what looks like Coca-Cola at this point. So I start to mentally freak out. I knew I was behind on hydration. I grabbed my buddy Luke and I'm like, hey man, I'm kind of struggling right now. I think I fucked my hydration up a little bit. And my brain just starts doing mental gymnastics of, you fucked up. This was the section that you said you were going to pay the most attention on things to. You're going to fuck your race up. This whole loop starts. I pop a couple extra salt pills. Crush down like a good amount of the hydration that I had. I think I had like 2 or 3 liters left, and I finished about a liter in the next like 15, 20 minutes, just trying to get everything, replenished hydration wise. In the process of this, my legs start cramping. My right quad and my right abductor specifically were really, really bad. They were biting me pretty hard to the point where I was having to stop and kind of take my pulls. And I was kind of propping myself up on them, like right under my chest, and leaning forward on them to get the weight off of my legs, because that was the only thing that was getting the cramps to stop. I did this for probably like 2.5, 3 miles up until we got to the Lane Mountain Aid Station. And then once we got there, this is the first like actual aid station that you hit for the race too. And it's insane. You have about 10,000 feet of climbing on your legs. You have a couple of water stops that you can replenish, but for the most part, from about mile 7.5 to 32, you got to be self-sufficient. So we get there. I end up running into Ricky, who is the athlete manager for Ultraspire, and then the owner of Ultraspire, Bryce, because I was wearing the Traverse pack and I was running their Blottle system. I can't recommend their products enough. If you're looking at doing 200-mile races, like there's no reason you should be using anything different, in my personal opinion. So I end up sitting down and chatting with them, and Ricky's just a rock star at this point. He's just grabbed me like run after run of cups of Coca-Cola that I'm jamming down. And I actually end up leaving this aid station feeling a little bit put back together. A little bit of the issue was I got the cramping to stop, and I think I had like replenished my hydration. I think I had caught it like right at the point where it was going to start getting bad. So that was huge. Ended up working through that. But the issue that I started running into when we started running down to Crown King was I noticed my legs were already sore from where the cramping had started. My right leg specifically was super, super sore. But that was just kind of part of the thing. I was like, okay, at least we got through that section. Let's get to your crew. Let's get, put back together when we get to Crown King. So buddy Luke and I, we head down to Crown King, see my crew for the first time, get some Red Bull in me, get rehydrated, get a couple Mountain Dews in me, and just get ready for the night section. So grabbed all of my gear from them. Luke was leaving a little bit earlier than me, so we had parted ways at this point. And I was just ready to kind of take it easy, run Senator Highway and get through the first night of the race. So headed down, kind of went into the night, shared some miles with some cool people, down Senator Highway, got some good running in, saw the most beautiful sunset I think I've ever seen out there. And I think the sun had just gone down when I got to Arasha Creek, and I got to that aid station, and it's all of these campfires and all this this really cozy looking environment. Essentially, it looks like a really nice campground that they've got set up. And I remember getting to that aid station, and I could see the look in people's eyes that was going to be where they stopped, and they were not going to be moving forward from there. So I kind of have this weird theory that hanging around areas where people are going to decide to call their race is a really bad spot to hang out. So I kind of skipped this aid station. I refilled a bottle, and I just kept it moving. This next section going up to Camp Kippa was brutal. I think it's about a 4,400 foot climb. I know in the race guide it says it's about 3,000. My watch said it was a 4,400 foot section, and that climb kicked the shit out of me. So it's super like loose, gravelly kind of sticks and stuff that you're going over. And they actually added, instead of going around one of the peaks to get to the top where Camp Kippa is, and you take this road around, you go all the way up and over one of these peaks. So they've added a little more climbing into that section. I get to Camp Kippa. I actually meet back up with Luke. He was on his way out when I was coming in. And then we both kind of meandered down to Camp Wamatochik. We get to Camp Wamatochik. Luke takes a small nap. I kind of get some things readjusted in my pack, kind of lube myself back up and get things sorted out. Luke takes a small nap there, and we continue on to Prescott, where we go into Whiskey Row, which is the first aid station where you get to see your crew. So sun's starting to come up when we get into Whiskey Row. This is mile 75. Get to see my crew. This aid station's super, super hype. Everybody's like cheering for you. You're kind of coming into Whiskey Row at Prescott, so downtown Prescott, and rolling there. And I made the decision here to sleep for the first time. And the reason being is my legs were getting more continuously sore throughout the night from the cramping and everything. So I decided to sleep here and try to give my body a little bit of time to recover. This was probably one of the points where I learned a big lesson on testing out your sleeping space before it's time to sleep there. We hadn't had me in the back of the Forerunner that we used for my crew car up until this point. So we had to make a couple on the fly adjustments to the sleeping arrangements that we thought were going to work. But I ended up laying down and getting about an hour of sleep here, woke up and crushed a full Freak Brothers pizza that we had bought at the aid station. And I was actually able to pick up my first pacer. My buddy Taylor that I grew up with grabbed me for the next section going into Watson Lake. We ran a good amount of this. Was still feeling pretty good at this point. Was kind of like waking up and a little bit drowsy. Good conversations with Taylor rolling into this. We hit Watson Lake, quick refuel, refilled some bottles, got some extra nutrition replenishment, drank another Red Bull, and then we continued on through the Fane Ranch section. pretty hot during the day here. We took it pretty easy going through there. This whole section's super, super exposed, and I knew when I laid down to take a nap that it was a little bit of a gamble deciding to do this section in the middle of the day like I wound up doing, but it's just kind of how everything worked out. So we took it easy through here, passed a couple of people coming into Fain Ranch, and then we were able to get to Fain Ranch in good time. I knew at that point too I was going to end up having to do the Mingus climb in the heat of the day, which was fine. I was ready for it. We'd done a few climbs out there in the heat throughout the training block, so I wasn't too worried about that. We roll into the Fain Ranch aid station, and I get a little surprise here. My wife and my 2 kiddos were actually waiting for me at the aid station, and I just didn't know they were going to be there. I thought we were going to see them at either Mingus or Jerome or Dead Horse the next day. I didn't know if they were going to make it out there for these aid stations, so that was a really big pick-me-up. My buddy Taylor handed me off to Darren, and Darren and I headed out for the big climb up to Mingus. We got through there really efficiently. I was really excited with how my body was doing at this point, and this was actually the first time that I was on the other side of 100 miles. So shortly after Fain Ranch is the 100-mile mark, so we get to Mingus, and we are starting to kind of address some issues that I was having, and then getting ready for what was going to be the night section. It was pretty cold when we got up to Mingus. The sun was essentially starting to go down. And so we had my crew bring everything in. I was kind of warming up, got some good food in me, got a whole bunch of pizza and lasagna in me at that aid station. And then we continued on, heading down to Jerome. Darren is probably one of the best pacers that I've ever had the pleasure of accompanying me at a race. He got me through a really tough section at Coldwater for my first 100-miler, and then he made these next couple of miles and these next couple of sections just feel like an absolute breeze. We were laughing for the majority of this run, and actually coming down to Jerome, he took a little bit of a small spill and busted his hand up pretty bad, not to my knowledge until completely after the race, but he took a little bit of a spill, and he is that good of a pacer where he was worried that his hand was broken at the time, or at least a couple of his fingers, and never made that known to me in the least bit. So Darren, you're a savage dude. That was insane. That section coming down to Jerome is an interesting one. It's really steep downhill. It's pretty technical. Your footing is never super sure coming down that. There's another portion of that you go through that it's just like broken glass and like a bunch of crazy shit just like accumulated on this trail that it looks like no one goes on except for the people that are running Cocodona once a year. So we got through there, come down to Jerome, and some of the weirdest shit just happened going through Jerome. You kind of carve through downtown Jerome, and there's like a couple off to the side, and it's probably like 3, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. And there's a couple off to the side. And she's standing up on this elevated platform singing for some reason. And I'm borderline convinced I'm hallucinating. And Darren starts laughing. So I know that these people are real. And we continue on, and we're kind of going through a little bit of the stretch of where all the bars and restaurants are in Jerome. And I swear to you, a cowboy materializes out of absolutely nowhere. And this dude almost bumps into Darren and I coming down the sidewalk. So we're both kind of like, where the fuck did that guy just come from? And we're both laughing about this because I think I'm hallucinating, but Darren's confirming that I'm not. And he doesn't know where this guy came from either. So we're having a pretty good laugh about that. We end up carving the rest of the way through Jerome. That descent down into Jerome had us both really confused, like where we even were on the trail. Darren has some pretty extensive knowledge of that Mingus Mountain area and Jerome in general. And he was pretty confused on where we were too. So a little bit of a mind fuck getting to that aid station. We get to the aid station. My crew is having a tough time finding a parking spot. So we were able to find them one. They were able to get to us, and we made pretty quick work of getting me refueled and out of that aid station. So we continued on. down Jerome going into Dead Horse. Pretty uneventful section. Darren and I were just kind of chatting it up. It was a great section, just getting to chat with him. We ended up going through Clarkdale, and I think we had almost come across a skunk at some point. It was smelling super, super bad. And then we get to what the river crossing is, and both of us, like idiots, kind of jumped through this area that wasn't actually the river crossing, and we thought we like sidestepped the thing completely, cutting through this bush area, and then we get to the actual river crossing. So we do the river crossing, get through there, and have my pretty big first hallucination coming through there. I just started Dead Horse. There's these kind of tamarack looking bush trees that you go through in the park leading into the aid station. And I was seeing some faces kind of materializing in the trees and like kind of getting the like thinking you're seeing people out of the corner of your eyes thing. And I knew we were getting into kind of dicey territory. So we get to Dead Horse. And this was the second spot that I end up laying down and sleeping for another hour here. Darren tags out at this point. He'd done about 40 miles with me. And dude, I seriously can't thank him enough, man. That section, was crucial in terms of that second night. Second night for a lot of people are typically when the wheels come off for 200 milers. Body starts doing things that it's never done before. You're going through a second night on minimal sleep for the first time for anybody that's doing a first 200 miler or multi-day race for that matter. And he helped me navigate that really, really well and kept my mind off of, things hurting, and all the stuff that starts to settle in on night 2 of that race. So I take a quick nap for I think it was about 45 minutes at this one. We ended up cutting the nap short. The sun was getting really intense and I just got blasted by the heat. So wake up a little bit earlier than I wanted to, pick up my buddy Adam. We ended up charging through Dead Horse, to the Deer Pass aid station. And I actually was able to see a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a long time. My high school wrestling coach actually showed up and surprised me. I didn't know he was following the race. I didn't know he was planning on being there. So it was really great to see him. That was a huge pick me up. It was a really hot, slow section. And it was really nice to just get to kind of see the reach that this thing had. I was getting a lot of messages from people, just saying they were tracking me. Everybody at my office was tracking the race and following along. So that was really special. And that was really cool to just kind of understand how much of a reach and how much it meant to people, the race at this point, in terms of just overall the impact that it was having. So got to chat with him for a second, got to kind of reconnect with him. We refueled at Deer Pass for a second, and there was a little bit of frustration for me. So the Sedona Canyons race had started at this point, and it was just insanely congested on the trails. Deer Pass, the aid station, was like, there had to have been like 60 or 70 people there. And so we got out of there pretty quickly, continued on from Deer Pass into Sedona. Beautiful trails. Adam was just an absolute champion. Adam and I had trained together a lot. We ran my first 50 miler together, and he's actually one of the people that introduced me to ultras. So really great conversations with him. Had a ton of fun on that section. Rolled into Sedona, and this was when shit got real. Get into Sedona, and I'm having some pretty serious foot issues at this point. My entire left and right foot were just completely covered in blisters. They were between my toes. They're on the outsides of my heels. And it was just starting to become a really big problem. So sit down at the Sedona aid station. We end up calling one of the medics over to kind of come and help address my feet. And it's just a mess. She didn't have tape. She wasn't able to get everything put together, and she works on my feet for probably a good 30, 40 minutes, and we had to completely undo everything that she did. So we undo all of the tape. We end up getting my feet somewhat taken care of, and this is probably one of the moments that I'm not super proud of with my crew, but I start getting frustrated because I'd been at the aid station for probably a good 2.5 hours at this point, and just understanding that I was going to have to do hangover in the dark when I had gotten there at a position where that hadn't been necessary up until this. So kind of jumped on my crew a little bit and told them essentially that I needed to get out of there. We needed to get me moving. And I picked up my buddy Perry at this point to get me through this next night section, essentially going from Sedona to Schnebly, getting me up hangover and all of that. Man, this was definitely probably my biggest low point of the race. I left the aid station just not feeling super good about the way I communicated with my race. Kind of jumped on everybody a little bit, so I was kind of carrying that with me. My feet weren't completely put back together and taken care of. We just kind of needed to get me out of there. So if you've ever done the Hangover Trail, it's a bunch of slick rock, and it's steep. And it's not anything that's dangerous or anything of that nature, but it's definitely tough to get through. And my feet were jacked up. We're kind of going through this slick rock section, having to navigate it in the dark. And I was just starting to kind of get to a point of really extreme sleep deprivation. So I'm starting to hallucinate pretty badly going up through hangover. My feet are killing me. I can feel blisters just popping as I'm going through this and new ones forming. And my buddy Perry's just, making good work of it, just kind of leading me through the climb, navigating through that section, and kind of keeping me in a good place. I was hallucinating so bad that there's these wash lines and all these different colorations on the rock. And I noticed that out of the corner of my eye, they were looking animated, almost like hieroglyphics or petroglyphs or something like that were like moving along with me as I'm continuing through this portion of the section, the course. And anytime that I'm looking down, I'm seeing little faces in all of the rocks. And so I'm kind of struggling mentally to kind of keep everything together. We end up getting through the tough part, like the climb up through hangover and then start traversing down, which is a tough thing within itself. So the nice thing was we could kind of follow the headlamps of everybody else that was kind of doing that section in the nighttime. And we were trying not to get turned around, and we end up running into a lady that's like, "You guys are going the wrong way. I just came from there." And so both of us are kind of pulling the map up on our phones, trying to convince her that she's not going the right way, because we were definitely going the right way. And I don't know what she ended up doing. She started working backwards, and we continued on up through Schnebly Hills. So you end up climbing through this section and going up back onto the Cocodona Plateau from here. It's a pretty big climb, and we just powered through it. Got up to the Cocodona Plateau. There's a small water station, and then you've got about 5 miles left to the actual aid station at Schnebly Hill. I was in a really, really bad spot here. My feet were killing me. You're essentially just on like a forest road for these 5 miles, and I was hallucinating really, really bad. It felt like I was kind of in like a cartoon for most of this section. It was super, super cold, super windy, pitch black, and Perry's just kind of helping me navigate getting through this thing. Started changing a bunch of stuff on the headphones, tried audiobooks, tried podcasts, tried music, just anything I could to get me through this section. And we end up fighting through it, get to Schnebly Hill, laid down to sleep here. So this is the end of night 3. I wanted to get a good sleep here and make sure that I ate a lot, because the next section was solo. And I think it's about an 18-mile section to Munns Park from here. We timed it perfectly. Laid down, it was dark, and this is when I started noticing that I was having some pretty severe hip issues, was when I was starting to lay down and try to fall asleep here. I think it took me about 30 minutes to fall asleep because I could just feel like a throbbing pain in my right hip that was starting to kind of flare up. I couldn't get comfortable. I ended up just having them leave the back hatch of the the car open to kind of keep some cold air flowing in because it was getting really tough to control my internal body temperature. My body was just kind of in freak out mode at this point. I could tell something was wrong with my hip, super sleep deprived, and I'd been out there for about 3 days at this point. So we wake up. We end up finding the medic that had worked on my feet the first time that did really, really well. So she got my feet nice and taken care of. I felt the best I'd felt in probably a full day leaving Schnebly. And I ran a good portion of that going into Munns. Completely solo on that section. And I would say about 2 or 3 miles away from the aid station was when I noticed the hip was going to become a really big issue. It had been fine when I left Schnebly, and I think just the impact of running that forest road just kind of made everything kind of flare up to where it was going to be for the rest of the race. Kind of hobbled into Munns Park. My buddy Taylor that was going to be pacing me for the next couple sections met me about a mile out. I was just kind of like asking where I was at. Definitely limping at this point. And then we got to Munns Park. I got to see everybody. Got to see the crew. The kiddos were there. So that was a really good recharge. Got an actual like thing of espresso in me. So I got like a full Americano in me at this aid station. And felt really good leaving Munns Park. I knew my hip was going to be an issue. Kind of took some stuff to kind of mitigate pain management. And then headed out. And we took off, I would say about an hour after getting outside of Munns. I was getting a little loopy and starting to kind of like feel the sleep deprivation setting in. So sat down and took my first trail nap. This was actually probably the biggest hallucination that I had, was sitting down and trying to take this nap. And even looking back on it, I don't know if it was a hallucination or if it was more of like a dream that I had. But I don't know if any of you have ever seen My Neighbor Totoro. There's like a big cat bus that this thing takes the kids in the cartoon and like jumps through the trees and takes them on a ride in this bus. I sit down to take a trail nap, and as soon as I do, my field of vision, I guess, when you close your eyes, like where you can see, just kind of starts doing this like pulsating, kind of like woo, 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 like you'd get when you're doing like a heavy psychedelic trip. And then from there, I could see myself like getting picked up in this said cat bus from My Neighbor Totoro, and it took me, and we rode out of the trees in Munns Park. And as soon as that vision stopped, my pacer was waking me up, and it was time to get moving again after my 10-minute nap. So that was kind of a trip. Woke up and I was feeling super good, super recharged. We continued to push on to Kelly Canyon, hit that aid station, did a quick restock on all my stuff, filled bottles, got moving, and we came into Fort Tuthill. Sun was starting to go down. Feet were definitely a mess. So we were working on my feet pretty extensively there. Full retape, kind of redid everything. Good refuel. And then got me moving again. So left Fort Tuthill with my buddy Perry again. Taylor's pacing duties had ended here. And this section is where shit kind of completely hit the fan. We leave the aid station. It's really tough. I couldn't run at all at this point. My hip was completely bound up. I had noticed that there was a big pocket of swelling on the front side of my hip. I ended up figuring out that I had blown a bursa sac in my hip, and I'm pretty sure that was starting to put pressure on my AT band. My AT band was making my hip kind of seize up. All of the muscles in there were just kind of like tightening up around it. And so I'm just kind of limping and hiking at this point. We get about 5, maybe 6 miles into this 17-mile section, and I'm really struggling. We kind of come through this part of the course where you kind of jump across a road and then head up into a forest road. And my buddy Grant materializes out of nowhere and comes and says hi. He stops and sees us, asks how everything's going. He walked for about a mile with us. And this was kind of one of those moments where it was like, okay, this is pretty cool. This has some reach, and this is touching a lot of people. Grant was an absolute champion for the rest of the race, took care of my family, fed them, let them hang out at a couple of the businesses that he owns there in Flagstaff. I actually ended up showering at his dad's house after the race. So Grant, I can't thank you enough for everything, man. You pulled me out of a really, really rough mental patch, coming to catch me on the course there, man. So thank you. We end up pushing on, and getting ready to head to Walnut Canyon aid station, from Fort Tuthill. This section took a really long time. I was having a tough time with the sleep deprivation. I ended up having to sit down and take another trail nap. After the trail nap, it was probably every like 10 to 15 minutes I was having to stop and have my pacer stretch me out. And that's when it was starting to feel like the wheels were coming off. My hip was getting bad enough to where I didn't know if physically I was going to be able to get myself to the finish line. The mind wanted to go. I was locked in. There was no point at any time during the race where I wanted to quit, where I wanted to just give up and throw the towel in. The only times that I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish the race were when my legs were cramping and this point in time here. So we end up kind of doing this rotation of, we'd kind of get me through 10 to 15 minutes of power hiking and walking, and then stretch, and then rinse and repeat just over and over and over for what felt like hours on end. And the sun starts coming up, and the original plan was I was going to see my crew at Walnut Canyon and then continue on to Wildcat and sleep at Wildcat and then take on Eldon as soon as the sun came up. And that was just completely out of reach at this point. So we get to Walnut Canyon. I'm in a really bad headspace at this point. So I just kind of have my crew take my stuff off and I lay down to sleep. I wake up, and I wake myself up. My crew was going to let me sleep as long as I needed to, essentially, and just kind of let me wake up after like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And I think I slept for about an hour and woke myself up. And I kind of had this moment where it was like, fuck, I think this is over. And I rolled over and I texted my wife and I said, I feel like I got hit by a car, was what I texted her. And I'm laying there and I look at my phone and I've got texts from people cheering me on, saying I'm so close, good job, things of that nature. And I'm laying in the back of the car, and I think my crew was at one of the other vehicles, just kind of letting me sleep. And my wife texts me back and she says, we're on our way. That's all she said. And I knew at that point I wasn't going to let the kids get to that aid station and watch their dad give up. And so I had a little bit of a mental conversation with myself, and I just remember telling myself vividly that this is not how the story ends. And I prop myself up, I get myself to the end of the car, and I just start getting myself ready. Put my shoes on. I was going to walk over to the aid station and get some food. And in the process of that, I think my dad and Greg had seen me up moving around, so they start wandering over. And there's another guy by the name of Peyton that we had kind of leapfrogged back and forth throughout the race. He's actually a athlete of Luke's that Luke coaches. And his dad grabs me as I'm wandering over to the aid station to go get some food and get ready to head back out. And he gives me a couple of lidocaine patches to put on my leg and hip. And essentially he says, the box says these last for 8 hours. You've probably got 4 to 6 hours. So about 5 hours until this wears off. I can see you're limping. Yeah, you've got 5 hours until this wears off. He gave me one backup. And so from that point, my mind was made up that I had 5 hours to get up and over Eldon. We put these on. My dad and Greg get over. My pack is ready. Adam was at his car getting some things ready, and I essentially told them, like, have Adam catch me. I'm leaving now. Story doesn't end like this. I'm going to finish this race today. And they just both kind of looked at me and said, okay, we'll see you at Wildcat. So I continued on to Wildcat. Adam caught back up to me. I was a man possessed at this point. I don't think I said a word to Adam during this section. It was just keep your feet moving, get to the next aid station. So we get to Wildcat, and at this point, it's up and over Eldon, and the finish line is a couple miles later. So we get to Wildcat. I get to give the kids a hug, and I told everybody I'll see you in Flagstaff. And I continued on. Get to the Eldon section, hit the Eldon climb, and my hips feeling good at this point. The lidocaine patches are working. Past like 7 or 8 people going up Eldon. Like I was just dead set. I had music on, was just ready to lock in. They also don't let you take a pacer from Wildcat to the finish anymore. So I'm completely solo at this point. Pretty warm during that climb, so I'm just making sure that I'm staying on top of my hydration, not making the same mistake twice, and just charge up this climb. And I remember getting to the part where you crest. It's a little bit of a false summit, but essentially you can see the dirt road that takes you to the towers up at Eldon. And the amount of relief that I had at this point was insane. Like at that point, I was just kind of looking down. It was like, all right, we did it. And so I get up to the towers. I actually see my friend Melissa Osazuski. She was out for a little bit of a training run, caught up with her for a second. And then I text my crew and everybody that was in the group chat, I'm coming down Eldon. I'll see you guys soon. Make my way down Eldon, and fuck, man. Coming down Eldon Lookout Trail with 250 miles on your legs, essentially, was pretty brutal. The patches started to wear off, and so I honestly just like dropped my shorts in the middle of the trail there and swapped the patches out to continue on. Get down and make my way to the Trinity Heights aid station, which is the last aid station before the finish line. Had like a popsicle there. I got to see one of my other wrestling coaches, Jeff, at this point, gave him a big hug. He came and met me at the aid station, and then continued on from there to the finish, and came into Buffalo Park and kind of dropped my pack for a second and just took a moment to kind of take everything in. Got super teary-eyed here and just kind of like let everything process for a second. Took my sun hoodie off. Got to Buffalo Park and saw my buddy Perry and Taylor were waiting there for me. You can take people into the finish with you from there. And we continue on from Buffalo Park into downtown Flag, and the live stream catches me and they kind of follow me into the finish, and kind of hobbled it in, and I was still kind of walking at this point, and then, you know, you take that left-hand turn and you can kind of see everybody. So I start running and came into the finish line, and I can't thank everybody enough that showed up at that point. That finish line was probably one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. It felt like there was an endless sea of people waiting for me, and just the amount of faces that I recognized turning that corner and understanding that it was done and I'd accomplished it was pretty fucking cool. It was pretty fucking cool. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you. I still don't know how to quantify what this race means. And the amount of people that showed up, the amount of people that have sent me messages since, Um, it's pretty crazy the amount of reach that this had, um, and how much this race meant to me, and how much it ended up meaning to a lot of other people that followed along. So, yeah, thank you everybody that sent messages and reached out. Um, this was really special. This was really, really special. Okay. So we get through the finish, and I get a moment to kind of hug everybody, and my coach is there at the finish line. I get to chat with him for a second. My good buddy Joe Corcione comes up and gives me a big hug. Coops gives me a hug. Josh Coleman, all the Winslow friends that were there. Man, I can't thank you guys enough, man. That was so cool to have that waiting for me there. It was a gift I didn't know I was going to get. So we sit there for a little bit, kind of figure out logistics. I get back and get showered up, and that was essentially the end of it. They give you my buckle, take my finish line photo, my before and after, like the bib thing I had mentioned earlier, and yeah, that was it. That was the full experience there. There's gonna be little things that I forgot that I'm gonna be bummed out that I didn't address there, and maybe as we do this Q&A section, I can touch on some of those. So I'll kind of roll into the next section of this and kind of dive into this Q&A portion. So one of the first questions that I got was, how did you sleep? I kind of went into that throughout the episode, but essentially in these multi-day races, you've got a crew car that follows you, and I slept in the back of a 4Runner. And then outside of that, I took a couple of trail naps, and essentially what that is you find somewhere that looks cozy on the side of the trail or up against a tree, and you just close your eyes and sleep. And to be honest with you, those naps that I took felt a little more recharging than the full sleeps that I took. And so that's something I think I'll take into account moving forward in any multi-day efforts that I do, multi-day races, is maybe not relying on the stop and sleep method so much. I think I can possibly get by doing the trail naps, but we'll explore that later. But yeah, that's essentially how I slept. You sleep on the side of the trail, and typically in the back of a car or a van or whatever you've got at your disposal for a crew vehicle. Next question was, how many times did you think about giving up? There was no moment that I wanted to give up. There was times that I was worried my body wasn't going to let me continue on, and that sucked. Those were rough moments, definitely. But there was no point that I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this or anything like that. I was really mentally engaged and in a good spot for the entirety of the race. So that felt really good. This next question, where did you poop? The good news is there's quite a few porta potties at the aid stations that you have at your disposal, which is good. There was one instance where like it was, squat down on the side of the trail and do my business. So those are kind of the two areas where I had to do that. This next question was from one of my pacers, but which pacer was the sexiest? And I got to say, all of you motherfuckers are equally just as sexy, and I love all of you. What was something your training didn't prepare you for that you had to figure out on the fly? So I'm glad this question came up because I forgot to touch on this. My mouth was starting to get like sores from it, from eating gels and drink mix. And I think this started happening around right after Dead Horse. So kind of coming into that Deer Pass aid station, I couldn't eat or drink much. I kind of had to switch to like pure water and then just eating snacks at the aid stations. The sugar from all the gels and all of the like drink mix that I was intaking was making it really hard to eat and drink anything. And then the other thing that was kind of tough to deal with that you can't really prepare for during training is there was like a spot in the back of my throat that became like a sore from the amount of dirt that you're breathing in throughout the race and clearing and like snorting through and like getting through your air passage. And so that even just the process of swallowing was starting to hurt. And so that definitely sucked. Like I couldn't prepare for that, but it was something I had to deal with. And then when those two combined with the sores on like my tongue and like my mouth from the gels, and then the stuff from that was pretty fucking brutal. So, I've actually seen a couple people address a few ways to mitigate this that I'm excited to try out. So I've got some strategies on how to take care of that next time. But yeah, lesson learned there. What moment or memory do you relive or replay the most? I don't think there's just one. I think a lot about more than like the actual moments and recapping those and reliving those. A lot of the internal dialogue that happened throughout that, I go back and rehash and think about. There's a couple of big moments where it's like you look back on and laugh, or I think a lot about kind of coming into the Fane Ranch aid station and them surprising me with the kiddos being there was really cool. But there's a lot of just like flashes that I think kind of replay in my brain. They all kind of cycle through. I'm also kind of noticing that there's little chunks of the race that I don't recall very well. Like even while I was doing the recap here, I realized like I don't remember much about being at the Kelly Canyon aid station. Like I can't tell you what it looks like at this point. So I might actually talk to my pacer and ask him what the fuck we did there, because I don't have much recollection of Kelly Canyon. I don't have much recollection of coming into the Schnebly Hill aid station because I was hallucinating so bad and needed to sleep at that point. So yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of things that my brain is kind of starting to try to reconnect and rewire those dots, I guess. The next question, my buddy Darren that was pacing me from there, he threw in, where did that cowboy come from? I'm still trying to figure that the fuck out. He's referencing the cowboy that jumped out during the Jerome adventure that we had. That shit was just so crazy. What would you do differently if you could do it again? Man, I think the sleep strategy I might approach a little bit differently. Like I had said, I think just the amount of time that got eaten up, getting ready to sleep, getting up, getting everything rebooted. I think it was good to do for my first 200 miler, but I don't know that it was necessary. And even like the early on nap that I ended up taking just to kind of let my legs recover from the cramping and everything. I think, I don't know if there's anything I would do differently. I think now that I just have experience in there at that distance and I've seen that course and felt all of that, I think I could just go in with a little more confidence to take some chances in areas that I've really, really played it safe, that I think ended up just tacking on more time than they needed to. Also, like, you know, my crew and everybody involved, like they didn't have any experience at that distance either. So we all just kind of learned it as we went. And by the end of it, we had gotten really efficient and had really figured things out. So I don't think there's anything I would do differently, really. I think everything happened the way it did for a reason. And I learned a lot of lessons about myself personally, fighting through all of that when everything was going to shit and all of my goal times were out the window, and essentially we had fallen back to like just get me across the finish line. It was a dogfight out there. There was nothing easy about that race. My body started failing. I ran into a lot of issues really early on, and I got it done. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I've had is like, I hope everybody at some point has an opportunity to put themselves in a situation where whatever you're doing feels impossible. And you're able to work through it and accomplish the thing against all odds. Because I definitely felt like there were moments in that race where there was no way, with everything that was happening, that finishing was in the cards. And it wasn't due to me not wanting to do it. It just felt like there was so many things compounding that it felt out of reach. And understanding that I can work through all of that was huge. And I'm still processing that and figuring out how to apply that more and more into my day-to-day. But yeah, I think everything went how it was supposed to. Would you do Cocodona again? Yeah, without a doubt. I think I might give it a little bit of time to see if it mellows out a little bit. My intention with getting into that race was at a time where it wasn't as popular as it was. And I don't mean that in any way of like trying to say that I knew about Cocodona before it got popular or anything stupid like that. The draw to that race for me was, it's not about the live stream. It's not about how many people watch and anything like that. There's just something really special about that race. And unless you've been there and experienced it, it's impossible to communicate. So I will be doing Cocodona again at some point. I don't know when. At this point, I've got another 200 mile on the schedule for next year. So I will be exploring that distance more, but I will definitely be doing Cocodona again. I'm actually really glad that someone brought this question up. They asked how the playlist was. Everybody that contributed to that, thank you so much. The playlist was amazing. I listened to it for the majority of the race. So I had the playlist by itself and I played that. And then I had taken a couple of different playlists over the years that I've accumulated, and I put those into one big master playlist that was like 60 hours long. And so I'd kind of alternated between the two, but the playlist was great. I'm thinking about keeping that alive and maybe naming it something else other than Cocodona Crowdshare, like it's currently named, and kind of letting it be this living, breathing playlist that everybody contributes to. Because I've had multiple people reach out and say that it's like their gym playlist or they run to it. So I kind of want to keep that thing alive and going. So how was recovery? What was the best, worst, and what were the best things, worst things, and most surprising things that you came across? Recovery was interesting, and we're about a month removed from the race, and I feel like I'm still not fully back. Like I'm still noticing little things here and there. The amount of brain fog that I carried for the first 2 or 3 weeks was absolutely insane. I had a little bit of a tough time with that, kind of fighting through that. Like my job is so heavy on the mental side, like in terms of writing code and thinking through things of that nature, that I had to really fight through that and just kind of power through. One of the worst things was my feet and legs swelled up really, really bad. And that took a little bit of a while to go down. And then as soon as the swelling essentially started to go away, it felt like I was peeing every 30 minutes. So that was weird. I don't know if my body was like purging extra liquid or how that process works. There's probably somebody else that's talked about that on a podcast that can tell you what that means. Everybody asked me, like, did you just sleep like a rock, the first couple of nights? And the answer is absolutely not. I slept like crap for probably a full week afterwards. My hip was waking me up like completely throbbing probably every like 30 to 45 minutes for a good week straight. That's finally stopped. And so that's huge that finally went away. And so I think that kind of covers that question there. I had a couple of probably humorous questions, but essentially this in its rawest form is, how's the dick? I didn't have any super bad chafing in that area or anything like that, so we made it out dick unscathed. That was a big win. One what was your biggest mental win? I kind of touched on this earlier. My biggest mental win was definitely staying engaged, staying present. I never got to a point where it was like, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this or anything of that nature. For the most part, I stayed really mentally in a good spot. And I think that was definitely the big mental win there. And then what were your darkest miles? Definitely Tut Hill to Walnut Canyon. That point felt like the race was over for me. But it's amazing what a nap and some ramen can do. So I guess there's that also. I think that about wraps it up here, everybody. I wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of a scope of what's next. I've got Man Against Horse 50 miler coming up in the middle of October, so I'm excited about that. And then I'm still kind of figuring out my race calendar. At this point, next year it's looking like I'll probably be doing Old Ephraim 200, which will be the inaugural year for that. My coach, Mike McKnight, actually puts that on, so excited for that one. Outside of that, I'd like to do another 100-miler between now and then, after Man Against Horse at some point. Probably one of the biggest things that I noticed and understand now is that I've got to get more consistent with racing. I need to race more. I think some of the reason that my body possibly was falling apart in the way that it did was just due to the fact that I didn't have any recent efforts with getting that much mileage on my body. Going into the triple digit areas, initially across the years was supposed to be that, but that kind of went sideways and I wasn't able to get the effort out of that I had wanted to. So, thanks everybody for listening. Again, the amount of messages and just the outpouring of love that I've gotten since the race, during the race, everybody that followed along, those messages during the race, whether I got back to you in the middle of it or not, they meant a lot. And the amount of people that kept an eye on the tracker and were cheering me on, thank you so much. It really did mean the world to me. I've got a couple of episodes queued up for the podcast. We're going to do a full reboot on this thing, so stay tuned for those. I've got some really great episodes coming up and some really cool people coming on. So thank you, everybody. That's going to be it for me.